Cool, you're good, Jess.
Okay. Hello and welcome to PMP Live. I'm Jessica, the Source Subscription Coordinator. Thank you for joining us in this new format where we continue to bring you the authors you love and their new books to the politics and prose community. At any time during the event, you can click the link in the chat to purchase tonight's book on PMP's website. You can also ask the author a question by clicking on the Ask a Question button, which can be found near the bottom of your screen. You can also read other people's questions and even vote for the ones you'd like to hear answered the most. Tonight, it is an absolute pleasure to welcome Raven Leilani, the author of Luster, to PMP Live. Raven's work has been published in Granta, McSweeney's Quarterly Concern, the Yale Review, The Cut, and other publications. Luster is her debut novel, which has been called the next great millennial novel by BuzzFeed. Tonight, Raven will also be in conversation with Allison P. Davis. Allison is a features writer at the New York Magazine and The Cut. Her essays and features have appeared in a wide range of publications from GQ to the New York Times. Soon we will all be able to read her forthcoming book, which will be published by Avid Reader Press. Now it is my pleasure to welcome Raven Leilani and Allison P. Davis to Politics and Prose Live.
Hi.
Hi.
I did just want to thank Politics and Prose for having me, and Allison for doing this with me. I lived in DC for a while, and so this feels really special to me. I think like the last thing I saw, because I went to a reading there some years ago when I was last there. It was Mark Danielewski's latest book. It might have been House of Leaves, but like I that was the last event I saw there. So this is really cool that I get to read here now. But I did want to start with a short reading, and I'll start from the beginning because that's easiest. So, the first time we have sex, we are both fully clothed at our desks during working hours, bathed in blue computer light. He is uptown processing a new bundle of microfiche, and I am downtown handling corrections for a new laboratory detective manuscript. He tells me what he ate for lunch and asks if I can manage to take off my underwear in my cubicle without anyone noticing. His messages come with impeccable punctuation. He is fond of words like taste and spread. The empty text field is full of possibilities. Of course, I worry about IT remoting into my computer, or my internet history warranting yet another disciplinary meeting with HR, but the risk, the thrill of a third pair of unseen eyes, the idea that someone in the office with that sweet post-lunch break optimism might come across this thread and see how tenderly Eric and I have built this private world. In his first message, he points out a few typos in my online profile and tells me he has an open marriage. His profile pictures are candid and loose, a grainy photo of him asleep in the sand, a photo of him shaving, taken from behind. It is this last photo that moves me, the dirty tile and soft procession of steam, his face in the mirror, stern with quiet scrutiny. I save the photo to my phone so I can look at it on the train. Women look over my shoulder and smile, and I let them believe he is mine. Otherwise, I have not had much success with men. This is not a statement of self-pity. This is a statement of the facts. Here is a fact. I have great breasts which have warped my spine. More facts. My salary is very low. I have trouble making friends, and men lose interest in me when I talk. It always goes well initially, but then I talk too explicitly about my ovarian torsion or my rent. Eric is different. 2 weeks into our correspondence, he tells me about the cancer that ravaged half his maternal family. He tells me about an aunt he loved who made potions with fox hair and hemp, how she was buried with a corn husk doll she made of herself. Still, he describes his childhood home lovingly. The digressions of farmland between Milwaukee and Appleton, the yellow-breasted chats and tundra swans that would appear in his yard looking for seed. When I talk about my childhood, I only talk about the happy parts. The tape of Spice World I received for my 5th birthday, the Barbie I melted in the microwave when no one was home. Of course, the context of my childhood, the boy bands, the Lunchables, the impeachment of Bill Clinton, only emphasizes our generational gap. Eric is sensitive about his age and about mine, and he makes a considerable effort to manage the 23-year discrepancy. He follows me on Instagram and leaves lengthy comments on my posts. Retired internet slang interspersed with earnest remarks about how the light falls on my face. Compared to the inscrutable advances of younger men, it is a relief. We talk for a month before our schedules align. We try to meet earlier, but things always come up. This is just one way his life is different from mine. There are people who count on him, and sometimes they need him urgently. Between his abrupt cancellations, I realize that I need him too, in a way that makes my dreams delirious expressions of thirst, long stretches of yellow desert, cathedrals hemmed in dripping moss. By the time we set our first real date, I would have done anything. He wanted to go to Six Flags. We decide to go on a Tuesday. He rolls up in his white Volvo, and I've only made it to the part of the pre-date routine where I try to find the most appropriate laugh. I put on 3 dresses before I find the right one. I tie up my braids and line my eyes. There are dishes in the sink and a pervasive salmon smell in the apartment, and I don't want him to think it has anything to do with me. I put on a complex pair of underwear that is not so much underwear as a bundle of string, and I stand before the mirror. I think to myself, you are a desirable woman. You are not a dozen gerbils in a skin casing. Outside, he is double parked. He leans against the car and remains like this as I come out, his eyes bright and still. His hair is darker than I expected, a black so opaque it looks blue. His face is almost obscenely symmetrical, though one of his eyebrows is higher than the other, and it makes his smile seem a little smug. It is the second day of summer, and all the city's powers have no sway over him. I reach for his hand, trying not to swallow my tongue, and something feels strange. Of course there are nerves. In person, he's a total daddy, his face alert and hard, softened only by the slight recession of his hair. But this strange feeling has nothing to do with that, nothing to do with me looking past his sensuous mouth and slightly askew nose for any indication that he is as nervous as I am. It is at his 8:15 a.m., and I feel happy. I am not on the Elle, smelling someone's lukewarm pickles, wishing I were dead. So I'll stop there. That's just a bit of the first chapter.
I want you to keep going. I mean, it was such an explosive first few pages. The minute I read it, I was like, I am hooked for 50 million different reasons. It's so just in magazine writing, the only thing that really matters is the lead, as long as you have a good lead, the rest of the piece can be like Jello. And so that was 100%. A great lead.
Thank you. Yeah. And that was my intent. I wanted to get in and start right away. I when I started writing this, I had come from, I think, a practice of writing where it was very is oriented sort of inward, where I wrote what made me happy, and a lot of it kind of felt a little opaque and inscrutable. And that too was joy. But when I started this book, I wrote it really with the intention that I wanted it to be read. And so when I got in, I was like, I need to get in and get out. And so I'm glad that I'm glad that you felt that.
Yeah, very well. Were there any other opening lines or opening scenes that you played with to start the book, or was that always the one?
I think actually I can't remember it now because I revised it a year ago, but that first line, which is the first time we have sex, that was I think originally just one paragraph down. It is my amazing editor Jenna Johnson. She was like, you just got to move that up, and she was right.
Yeah, truly, thank you, Jenna. Yeah. I have so many questions on my question list, but I also just, while I'm thinking about this opening passage, the one thing that also really got me besides that first line was the details, the Spice Girls tape, or the way you described underwear, or lukewarm pickles in the subway. They're so evocative, and I would just love writer to writer to know how you select those details that really illustrate so much about a person and a time and a place and her age and everything, the reference points.
So when I'm writing, I mean, I just for instance, towards the end of the book, there's kind of a big Comic-Con scene. I really, when I'm writing, I want hopefully the reader to come to it and feel that chaos and that motion and how a room smells. There's a lot you can do with, I think, the New York subway when it comes to that. But for me, the details are most of it. I try my best to write, prose or characters where you feel them through their sensory experiences. And especially because I write a lot, there's a lot of sex in here, that was key.
Yeah. Oh, the sex, we'll get there. The sex scene. We have a lot to talk about. But, you know, sort of spinning off of that, one of the things that really struck me about reading Luster, maybe it's because I was rereading it like while New York was no longer really accessible, you know, with lockdown and everything, but it made me so nostalgic for just like the streets of New York. And I think that the city is a character in your book in a way that that I feel like is really striking. And I would love to know, like, what is the New York that you wanted people to feel? You know, like we had Carrie Bradshaw's New York, but like, what's Luster's New York?
And you know, I love Carrie Bradshaw's New York. Like I constantly, like a maniac, rewatch Sex and the City. But I think my version of New York, and I love this city, is the version that is highly pressurized. You know, like a real kind of concentrated chaos. You know, especially like the scenes where she is kind of on her Postmates route. Like I wanted to speak to this almost sort of athletic way the city makes you move through it. There's I think I almost feel like I didn't have to do a ton of work in service of that, because all of the data was right there. But I just think there's so much happening all the time. Like, and in fact, I'm happy that you read it and felt, you know, that missing that sort of that, I don't know, that of constantly being in the middle of a crowd. I kind of wanted to, I wanted to capture that, you know. Even Edie on the page, you know, kind of speaks romantically about the fact that being in New York, being among so many people, there's like a beautiful anonymity that comes from that. You know, the idea that you can be lost, you know, in the crowd. You know, the idea that, like, I don't know, it's interesting because she is also sort of fighting for visibility, but I think there's real comfort for a lot of us in that invisibility that I think New York really, really provides. And so there is that, but there really is the sweat and the smell and, you know, the chaos. So I think for me, it was, my version of New York was the one in which you have an apartment that has a window that doesn't open, you know, like you have an apartment where you are constantly kind of scheming about how to get rid of these mice and these roaches, you know, like, and that's Edie's city. And it perhaps isn't, you know, Carrie Bradshaw's city, but I think it is, you know, it's just as valid.
Absolutely. And so energizing in a different way, you know, just it set this up for Edie that, you're right, like she could take solace in this anonymity while trying to figure out how to make herself stand out. And I thought that was really beautiful, you know. Yeah. I'm also curious because you mentioned before when we were chatting that you actually take a lot of walks. And so I, you know, when you're writing this, were you walking through like Midtown for inspiration, or did you have like a different route? You know?
Oh no, I mean it was all there already. But I take these long walks from Brooklyn into Manhattan, and I started doing that like in 2012 when I was here before I left and moved to DC, where I lived in Crown Heights, and I would walk to the Village. And there is something I think so. I mean, there's so much data, and there's so much, in a way, there's so much data that it's almost numbing. I feel like it's meditative in a way. And I wanted to, you know, create a kind of city, a kind of New York where you feel that bandwidth, that overwhelmed bandwidth. And I think I didn't necessarily need to be out in it to be able to put it on the page, but I am out in it all the time, and it just kind of came through my fingers.
Yeah. Well, I definitely felt it on the page, and it made me so sad to just like be in my apartment. But so I want to back up because I couldn't resist kind of jumping into some of the details about the book. But I know that everybody asks you sort of, you know, how did you start writing? But I want to know specifically when you knew you were a good writer.
Oh, you know, honestly, I think it's like 2013, 2014. And I had been trying to be published, you know, I was trying to publish poetry. That was where I started. And I'd been trying to get published for a couple years. I remember, like I said to my partner, I'm like, it's never going to happen, because I had been collecting these rejections, like, as you do, and like I didn't realize at that point that is really just part of the process. And then it was like, it wasn't necessarily that I felt that I was good, it was that I'm doing something right? That, it means something when, because I got an acceptance. The New Haven Review is the first, place to ever publish me. And it came after like a year or a couple years of really trying and submitting things and, taking those things back when nothing stuck and like revising like mad. And for, 5 years after that first publication, I really credit literary journals for kind of every now and then when an acceptance would come, making me feel like, okay, I'm doing something right. Like I'm doing something that's good. So it really was a process over like 5 years. And I think with Luster writing this book, a couple books had preceded it when I came to the MFA. And I think starting this book in like, I think it was my second semester workshop, it's something about it felt different, something, I just felt a different energy, a different investment in it, an investment in a way that it was almost scary, that I really cared about it. And I think, I don't know, I think that was also a moment in which I felt like this feels urgent to me. And then hopefully, right, it feels urgent to the reader, because I think readers can sense that when you're checked out, and also when you really care.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, what was the book where maybe it was like Water for Chocolate, where she would put all of her emotions into what she was baking, and you could tell like when she's sad, when she's that's how I feel about writing all the time. Excuse me. And so I feel like characters are with us so long before we put them down on a page. When did like Edie and this book start taking shape in your mind? Was it just in that second semester seminar, or is it something that had been with you for a bit?
It was really in that moment. And I think there are a number of reasons why, I had written, I think, in those two projects that had gotten me to the point where I started this book, I had written to like my bliss, and kind of, it was a real act of passion, but it was messy, and it was, it had no direction or really no intent. And when I was, in the program, the structure there that I found, having to articulate what I was trying to do, really, it transformed how I thought about fiction and what I wanted it to do. And I say too, because I was like, it was 2 years in that program, and I knew that, and I had spent a lot of time before applying, really like waffling and, not sure if I was going to do that. And, like I think a lot of people do when they move somewhere else to go to school, there was a part of me that was like, God, like this has to work, like this has to be worth it, because I've uprooted my life. So there was that urgency, where I was like, if it doesn't happen now, then it just won't happen. So I really, in that moment, I felt really animated by the feeling of borrowed time almost. And it started to happen. It started to happen where the characters, Edie came, naturally came to me first, and was I think a more direct line to what I was, kind of grappling with in terms of trying to do my work and trying to do my art. And then I knew that, I knew I wanted to write about desire, I knew I wanted to write about the body, as well as art. And the rest of the characters kind of just came, they followed.
And then when did you sort of decide on this story, this like putting Edie in an open marriage with some crazy white people, which like, yes.
Right away, actually, I kind of knew that was the like initial conceit, and that I could have fun with that, that was really important to me, that as I write, it was something fun and entertaining for me. That we find a young Black woman who is seeking connection, and and who is seeking it with a man who has complications. You know, I wanted to write a story that tried to, to depict that balance of wants within, being a third tenderly, and didn't sort of defer to like the shorthand of how that might look. Like I wanted to have fun with how does it look when all three, have welcomed this, and are seeking something from this. So yeah, I knew I wanted to write about an open marriage, and partly because I love writing about relationships. I love reading about relationships. I often say that I really eat all of it up, and I could watch two people in a room, talking about their relationship forever. I could read about that forever. And so there was that too, where I wanted to write about that. And kind of it just kind of took its own shape as I went on.
This is an aside, but now I have to know, like, what relationships inspired this one in the book? Like, what were you reading or watching? Or as someone who loves, I also love people's, like, to be a voyeur in everyone's love life. So
yeah, voyeur is I think the best word. So I would say that like it wasn't like any sort of not prime time, but like any sort of like kind of cable TV show in which you might see a character like go to the bathroom, like that kind of grade of of TV where you see those those small quiet uncomfortable parts of, like, I guess they call it slice of life a little bit, and maybe less kindly mumblecore. But like I really I cannot think. I'm just blank, of course. I blank when I have to think of the shows that I really love that do that. But actually, what's weird is I'm rewatching The Affair right now, which is like right on the nose. More just because I really love. I've never seen Rashomon, which I think is like the movie in which you're experiencing reality from different points of view. But that is, I think, like sort of the kind of show that I mean, that I just like love and kind of immediately kind of click with. But in writing this, I wanted to replicate that feeling of voyeurism that I get from the things I love most, where I feel like I am looking in on something I shouldn't be. And I think talking about authenticity is really tricky. What is authenticity, but the idea of seeing someone in a moment that is not studied is, that really guided me as I was writing about these relationships.
Did you do any any research into like how open relationships work, or like what the rule, just when we're drawing from the experience where it came from?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I wanted to get it right. And so that's partly where the rules came in. How does this work if it works? And you read the book, who knows, like, is it actually working, within the book? There's still quite a lot of dysfunction there, but I wanted to, in presenting this arrangement, like make it less a thing that, Rebecca as the wife is totally against, or Eric as the husband is like kind of undermining in the way that you might expect, a married man who's sort of dallying. I wanted to sort of depict a couple, and I suppose a third, who are actually trying to navigate this arrangement on the rules that have been established, and that was a big part of it, and it actually did a lot of work for me when it came to depicting the marriage. Was asserting these rules allowed me the opportunity to then break them, which was like, I think was really fun writing.
I mean, you created, Eric is a very complicated man, but like on the page, what a daddy. Like, also would have risked it all for Eric. Yeah. I mean, in your mind, like if you had to cast this man, who would he be? You know, is it like a, I can't even think of a male actor now.
Right.
It's not like a Zac Efron, but like who would be your dream casting?
You know, I think like a kind of, oh boy, like kind of like old, almost like old fashioned in the way that like I think the male physique is depicted in like kind of a more like kind of, I'm thinking rectangular, you know, kind of a massive rectangular human who is kind of just, I don't know, a little bit, seems like he never sleeps, you know, like I think this is tricky to say. Do you know Rob Delaney? I think I love his work in Catastrophe, and I think I think he would be a great fit.
Wow. Okay. Unexpected, but I get it. Someone needs to let Rob Delaney know. New daddy role. Well, you know, I feel like an open relationship, I don't know, I feel like that you find on like an online dating app is such a like, is like a true millennial marker. And I love that Edie is like the rarely seen sort of messy Black woman. And I know that a lot of the press has talked about that. And like, as a hot mess myself, like, thank you. Thank you for doing right by us. But do you feel like an Edie could have existed at any other time, or is this like a very specific sort of millennial messy person? You know, now that you're getting all these best millennial novel accolades.
And you know, like I naturally have like complicated feelings around that classification, as I think like we all do.
Yeah.
But I absolutely do think that, you know, this is, you know, I'm a millennial. So is Edie, I think. Like I realized that I had not actually done the math. She might be like right on the cusp. But I think that it is absolutely sort of particular to this moment, you know, a moment in which you would have a character like Edie who is living in this a particular kind of instability and precarity, and having to kind of surrender herself to like the real brutal demands of late capitalism, like a la Postmates, you know, like that's not something I think that's millennial shit, you know. And I do think in terms of the open marriage, I was actually surprised that, and I am surprised that it feels still slightly controversial. You know, I do think that openness in terms of relationships has kind of been a thing for a while, but I think it's kind of getting a different kind of airtime. And so in terms of representing that on the page, I think the difference might be that the way it's presented is hopefully without judgment, you know, and I think that could be part of it.
Well, I mean, I guess that probably leads us to the question that the sex. We have to talk about the sex scene, which, like, I mean, there was so much of the book that like is noteworthy, but I do think that you wrote about sex in a way that hasn't been written about in so long, or even about the modern way in which we have sex. And so I just sort of wanted to know, like, how are you writing about sex, and what's the story you wanted to tell about desire through Luster and through Edie? And I guess Eric was there too. So
I think I wrote the sex the only way I really could stand to write it, which is the kind of sex that is blunt in its depiction of you know, the machinery, like the awkward machinery of it, you know, like not just the parts that are pretty and curated, though I think that absolutely has a space, especially if your characters are in that moment, you know, trying not to reveal things to each other. But I think when it comes to depicting sex or desire in general, what was important to me, and you know, because I think this, you know, as a personal flag I fly, is the idea of you know, the uncoolness of complete earnest engagement. And that is, there's a yuckiness about that, you know, and I wanted to depict what that looks like when two people are bare, or, you know, three people are bare with each other, and making those private, you know, almost secret, conspiratorial, you know, negotiations around the body. And the body itself is a site of such drama, you know, like it felt natural to delve into that kind of all the way. And, you know, it was important for me to write about, you know, not just the, you know, the sort of tenderness of sex, the weirdness, like the violence of it. So I do think that makes room for a more humane and sort of, I don't know, inclusive is that's not the best word, but like, you know, a more human sort of connection, which bears contradiction and you know, is messy. So for me, it was, yeah, it just I didn't want those scenes to feel sterile. You know, I wanted them to feel, you know, I wanted to, like I write about New York, I wanted to engage those senses of my reader, and I wanted them to feel a little bit uncomfortable, like they were, you know, like I like to feel, and I know that's subjective, looking in on something that was private.
And, you know, you mentioned portraying some violence along with the tenderness and the awkwardness but, you know, it does get violent. And I'm wondering, yes, what was the thinking behind including that explicit of violence in with the sex?
Totally. So, I mean, I will say, like, I still feel, and I think I will always feel, that it is really tricky to talk about, especially what, you know, what it looks like and what it means when it is like a Black woman on the page, sort of welcoming this violence, you know, because I do feel strongly that, you know, like as I was writing, I had all of these, you know, anxieties like you do, like what's my responsibility to writing about a, you know, a warm and tender relationship, you know, or writing a relationship, you know, which, you know, a woman isn't subject to this violence. It felt at moments deeply unfeminist. I have to like, you know, admit that. But I did think it was more important that I make room for a Black woman to assert her agency and be excited by what she's excited by, you know, and to lean into this sort of this part of sex that is annihilation, you know. And I think that you could take it two ways. The idea of obliteration as feeling, as pure feeling, but also obliteration as no feeling. And I think Edie is constantly teetering between those, and it sort of manifests in the sex she has.
And I wonder, I mean, it also clearly manifested in her sort of torturous relationship with Rebecca, that back and forth between feeling and not feeling, which like could be sexual as well, it could be read sexually charged sometimes. But I do want to know more about the conversation you were having by putting those two characters together in the situation.
I felt us also there a real responsibility to depict bluntly, one, their fundamental differences and like the kind of extreme power imbalance that is also between them. You know, Edie is, you know, a young woman who is literally brought into this house because she doesn't have anywhere to live anymore, you know, and she has engaged, you know, with this couple really on Rebecca's terms. You know, Rebecca is often in the kind of usually the one in control, and Edie is very much out of control, and that is, I think, compounded by, you know, by Edie being Black and Rebecca being white, and the real, almost the quiet violence, you know, the quiet violence that Rebecca is complicit in. You know, I wanted to talk bluntly about that, but also make room for them on the page to relate to each other as women who are, who are seeking and who are serious. At least, Edie is trying to be serious about her art. Is trying to be serious as a person. Kind of fucking up a lot along the way. But I wanted to talk about what that looks like when another woman kind of takes you up on that, and introduces, and kind of affirms you in the way that often men, can't. and I think I wanted to talk about the kind of conspiracy that develops between them, which was way more interesting than the idea of them like fighting over Eric. It was more true and more interesting that I depict two women who are sort of engaged in this dance that is, partly, two women seeing each other, wholly and revealing themselves to each other, and the kind of immediacy and romance of that, but also how that is complicated by the real power imbalance between them. And so, like, in a way, it keeps delaying the gratification or the kind of eroticism that is sort of byproduct of that. And that was really fun to play with, I will say, kind of constantly denying that. It's the only way I think, when I watch TV or read books, it's the only way I can ever really maintain interest in the couple, right? Is when, when that, I don't know, when they're still trying to take steps towards each other, and there are barriers in the way. I think the moment the barriers are removed, it is generally a less interesting dynamic.
Do you watch Killing Eve?
Yes.
Yeah. There's something about the like unresolved sort of sapphic energy.
Yes.
That I loved it so much in this, because it's like, to me, they were the living embodiment of like, you dress for other women, and like
yes.
that relationship was like for women and for the women together, and it's why it felt so cruel when she lent Edie the dress that didn't fit.
Yeah.
I was like, that that was like such a power move,
That's right.
Yeah. And then you just know how Edie felt being uncomfortable in the dress. But you did such a good job, and I would love to hear you talk more about the decision to do this, but about truly being in Edie's body when she felt gross, or when she felt bloated, or when she was in a skin tight dress and felt like sexy, or I would love to hear more about your decision to get so detailed with the bodily function of it all.
That was important to me. The IBS representation, is important to me. And I wanted to talk about, I now that you say it, when I think about it, that's true. Like, when she's wearing spandex, when she's wearing a dress with bones, and it's, and when she like can't shit. And that was really important to me, because ultimately underneath these sort of different like intersecting pressures that she is sort of contending with, there is a human body underneath that is sort of like subject to this is, I mean, I feel like it sounds grim to say it, but like the brutality of living, like the body is affected. And that was one real way for me to make room to talk about a woman's body in a way that wasn't pristine or trying to curate its functions, making a way for it to talk about the drama of that, the gore of that, was really important, but also to kind of situate the reader hopefully in her body, so that you feel as she moves through the world the pressure. You feel the deterioration, and you feel the joy and the desire.
Was it a conscious decision or a conscious need while you're writing Edie to create an Edie? Like, it feels very urgent reading it. Like, I needed this woman to exist. I needed to know about her IBS and like all the discomfort and the pressure. But did you have it in mind that like the world needed this version of a Black woman?
I definitely needed this, and I think that that was I think where I started, and where I think a lot of us do start, which is like you kind of write what you need to see. And I, you mentioned, that you're a mess, and I'm a mess, and I wanted to see, like I wanted to see that more in the ether, what it looks like, when a Black woman is just, is human and fallible and kind of, and fucking up, and in making room for, because I think if you don't make room for that, then you cannot make room for, the tenderness that you would hope to afford a human person who's just trying to kind of make it through. That, like, the idea of, and I talked a little bit with Britt about this last night, but like it is important to me, the idea of a Black woman who is kind of, a super woman, who is sort of impervious and noble because of how much she can bear, and how who she can save and who she can rehabilitate. Like I need the rehabilitation. Like I wanted to make room. I think that element of, which is often framed as, as virtue, as being, as being superhuman, but it's inhuman, and that it makes it so that, it makes it so that you cannot be entirely human, and it makes it so that when you need help, that it's not legible even. And so for me, I wanted to write a Black woman who is, who is really trying to figure it out and making mistakes. That was important to me, and who even like isn't just making mistakes that a human would make and having natural responses, but who sometimes does bad things, like we all do. That was important to me.
And at the end of the day, is still like a person worth worth helping.
That's
I
right.
feel like you're not painting a villain. It's just a complexity that Black women aren't always allowed on a page.
That's right.
Yeah. But I loved that. So I loved Edie so much in the moments where she was nurturing or just helping Akila. And I thought that was a real twist, throwing in the adopted Black daughter who just was lost in this white suburban hell, as so many of us have been. And so I wanted to know, sort of more about the Akila of it all. Was this a character that like was any part of you, or yeah, go on.
100%. I 100%. I think I'm if in fact we would like conflate like author and story, like I'm more Akila than I've ever been Edie, truly. And like when I brought in Akila, like I, much like with Edie, who is sort of trying to manage her isolation, like Akila too is alone in a place that cannot really adequately see her or witness her, and she kind of is trying to find it out without really any reference points at all, and there is I wanted to speak to, well, there's also the part of Akila that is, she's a teen. She's like a teen. Oh my God.
We're old.
She's a fan. She's a person. She's a kid who is finding what she loves, and also trying in her own way, trying to survive. Like she almost inherently understands the instability of her situation the moment Edie comes in. And that too is, well, I mean, now that I'm thinking about it, that too is relevant in like the sort of hardening that we kind of do around Black women. Akila is a kid who already kind of knows too much and has seen too much, and her maturity is not a good thing, right? Like she hasn't been allowed to fully be a child, and a lot of us haven't, right? Because we are oriented first in understanding that there are certain things we have to do to survive. And Akila is dealing with that in a place in a suburb where the threat is different. That it is she's being surveilled. She understands that as Edie kind of notices the moment she's there too, and it is what she's up against is different. It's a little more insidious, and it's a little more quiet. And I wanted to speak to that, and also make room for her to be a kid, her to like write fan fiction and want to go to Comic-Con and want to cosplay. So that was I wanted to write like a little black nerd, like that. That was me, like I wanted to put that on the page.
I have a couple more questions. We have some audience questions coming in that I swear I will turn to in a second. But I mean, the fanfic just made me remember in another interview that you gave earlier today that you mentioned that at one point you had tried to write a sexy science fiction novel.
Yes.
And so I was wondering how much of Akila's fanfic was based off of your own.
No, they're totally separate things. But I would say like that one book that I that sort of sexy, smutty body snatching book that I tried my hand at, which is just not like I feel like I should delete it like entirely. But I in writing about fan fiction, that too is like part of that, the like religion that is my religion now, which is a religion about really meaning it, at least trying to mean it, and engaging earnestly, and like that is a really like fandom is a really really earnest act. And because she's kind of this surly teenager, like that was sort of the like Edie has her disco, which is free of irony, and she really loves it, and Akila has her fan fiction and her comics, and those moments where we get to see these Black women less studied and absolutely just kind of full of joy.
Yeah. So all of it's so important and really is in concert with each other. The joy and like the messiness and the sex, it's just like all so important to have on a page. So thank you, like truly, for this book. Okay, I have to be fair to the audience who are asking questions, even though I have like 70 more. So, but the first question, this comes from Kind of France. Despite the millennial categorization, do you think Edie will stand the test of time in the literary world?
Oh man, I mean, I hope so. I think that's the thing, that like you put a book out into the world and you hope that in a year or two people still care about it, and feel it. I really truly, I can't say, but I hope, and the reason I think maybe it hopefully will have some sticking power is because I tried to tell this story as honestly and as brutally as I could, and as humanely, and I tried to write toward the kind of specific and the private. And as the book came out yesterday, and it's been really cool hearing from people who are beginning to read or who have already read, and like what I'm hearing is that those are the moments, right? The kind of the private and specific that are like, oh, I that feels familiar to me. So I think hopefully that remains.
Okay, next one. This is a good one. There's a real musicality to the language in Luster, and a lot of actual music references as well. Were there any songs you were playing on repeat while you were writing this?
Oh my God, yes. So Donna Summer's Spring Affair is just like, it's off the Four Seasons. I think it's Four Seasons album, is so good. That's always on rotation. I would say Portishead's All Mine is really great. Prodigy's Smack My Bitch Up, which like maybe seems on the nose. I really love Prodigy. I would say Kalela's, I think that's how you say her name, Hallucinogen album is so good. FKA Twigs Poppy Pacify was really good. Like I had all those Minnie Riperton, I had I had her constantly in rotation. I think those are just a handful.
You really should make like a Spotify playlist.
I would love
share. Please do. I'm like demanding you do that. That was a really good playlist. Also, just like great references all over the place again. So I love that. Yeah. Well,
Phil Collins, Face Value. I should have said that, right? Like.
Oh yeah.
Just like.
Of course. To go along with that question, the visual art. You described it so well, and you're a painter, and I'm wondering, was there like a body of visual work you were also referencing while writing, or that sort of would be on the mood board for the book?
I mean, a little bit, because I mean there are paintings in there that I reference. Like Artemisia Gentileschi, like her paints, like I think it's Judith Slaying Holofernes. I hope I haven't butchered that, but it is actually my favorite painting, and I think I've seen it once, like in real life. But like paintings that involve carnage and like muscle and anatomy, and paintings with that sort of stark shadow and light, I really am drawn to, like your Caravaggio, that whole kind of his cohort. I can't think of others, but I also really love, I mean, in general, just painters. I love Amy Sherrill's. I went and saw her exhibit like some months ago, and I just love the way she renders textured hair, black hair, which I think is really like you have to have a really specific technical prowess to do that. Kahinda Wiley, I just think is fantastic. Like it just is really kind of colorful and juicy. Really, I'm mostly drawn to paintings that involve the body and that involve the face. And so, even though like I think my favorites are generally impressionists, which aren't really always bodily. I just love anatomy. I love color. So anything that kind of, has that component.
I was wondering if it was like a Georgia O'Keeffe flower or something.
Right. I mean, I think that actually makes a lot of sense, especially when it comes to, Edie and Rebecca.
A lot of themes. Okay, one more from the audience. So if a character in Luster could tell this story back to you, which point of view would you be most interested to hear from, and why?
Oh, I would say Akila, but it's almost a tie between her and Rebecca, though I feel like Rebecca gets plenty of page space, but it would be Akila, because I think that she is in the background in a way, where she also is much like Edie, kind of in this observer role, and you can feel her, her feelings around this engagement, but there's a certain kind of caution she exercises because she also is aware of her precarity in the situation. She doesn't, she wants to stay with this family, and so I really don't get to kind of see her in like the way she kind of acts out towards the end. And I would definitely, I think, want to see more of what she sees, with this thing that is happening in her house,
Yeah. You really should do like the Stephanie Meyer's, just sort of the Twilight companion. Yes. Like I would love for you to do that from Akila's point of view for a sequel, or just like Edie and Rebecca run off together. The sequel would be super.
That was like one idea I had when I was halfway through. I was like, okay, maybe, but it didn't.
Oh, why did you change your mind?
I just I couldn't figure out how to handle it, to be honest. But yeah, that did cross my mind.
Well, before I let you go, I wanted to ask one last question. It feels sort of like we can't be two Black women talking about books and writing on the 1 year anniversary of Toni Morrison's death without sort of addressing. And since Luster of all the many things it was able to do, it was also a really good like workplace novel. And it made me think of, you know, Toni Morrison's famous New Yorker article, "The Work You Do, the Person You Are."
Yeah.
And I wanted to end on your rules for working, sort of in the same vein. You know, I know that you write what brings you joy, but like what else as an author are your own rules for working and writing?
I think my number one rule is to write toward what obsesses you, you know, what you were most preoccupied with, and the idea that really is enough to animate the page, like so much so that it is actually okay, I think, to repeat yourself, because I think there's so many different angles that you can look at a thing from. And so I think you know, one is to write from a place of obsession, of earnestness, that like really something you care about. But for me too, it is, you know, it is important that I have a certain vulnerability on the page. And I think my vulnerability is really quite apparent. Like as a parent, it's in the language, is in the fact that I am really, you know, when I feel best about my work, I'm having fun, and I feel like I'm, you know, I'm able to sometimes surprise myself. You know, like I want to write towards that surprise, and yeah, write towards that specific, you know, that the thing that is, you know, obsessing me. I think that's really it. Underneath it all is to write towards that obsession, but also to make it a real kind of rigorous practice in terms of not waiting for inspiration, which is like really rich to just say, like it's harder to do, you know, but to make it a real habit, and to know, I think, that even if you've written a page, you know, the day before and you come to it and it is total garbage, and you have to delete it, that you had to write that page in order to get to the next part, the part that will maybe stick. And that's at least what I tell myself when I end up doing that, you know, so that it's okay to have, you know, spin your wheels a little bit. And so I think those are a few rules that I live by and write by.
I'm going to borrow all of those. Writing is impossible.
Yeah, right now it is actually quite impossible. I will say that. Yeah. Like I've been able to paint, but really not super able to write right now.
Well, you know, give yourself a break, because like you just, your debut novel is like the shit. So congratulations. And you know, this is a really great, thank you so much for allowing me to moderate this conversation with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I guess that's, do we get Jessica back? Because I feel like that was the end. No? Jessica?
Hello, sorry.
Okay.
I realized I can't start the video on my end.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, I was waiting for you to drop the question about what Raven's reading.
Yes. Well, what are you both reading right now?
I'm reading I just honestly have a bunch of books. Like there have been so many really beautiful debuts that have come out. One being Lolita, a memoir by Allison Wood. I love How Much of These Hills is Gold by Ken Zhang. I love Real Life by Brandon Taylor. Little Gods. I love Days of Distraction by Alexander Chang. Lakewood by Megan Giddings. These Ghosts Are Family by Maisie Card. Want, which has like, I actually have this right here. It is like,
oh, incredible. I really want to read this.
Crooked Hallelujah by Kelly Jo Ford. I really just like, there's so many, like, there's so many good books that are out. And yeah, I think I'll stop there.
Cool. That was a good list. I only brought one to share, but I'm reading In the Cut. It's by Susanna Moore. Speaking of books about desire. Book. Oh my god, it's mind blowing.
Oh my gosh, I read that like this last winter. It is incredible.
Yes, and like the way she discusses like what women feel when they're sexually aroused, and just like about desire. And the gaze, it's incredible. It's one of my favorite. It's like so far one of my favorite books this year, even though it's old, but it's great. Yeah, that's all. That's for me.
That's so great. I just finished Lakewood and it's so good. And I just finished yours as well, and it's also so good.
Thank you.
Well, thank you both so much for being here. It's been a pleasure speaking with or listening to you both. And thank you for everyone watching. You can buy Luster using the link in the chat. In the meantime, stay well read, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much, Raven.
Thank you.
Congratulations.